Or it isn't. All right, it's Malzberg panel time here on America Talks Live. By the way, 877 Newsmax if you want to weigh in. 877 Newsmax. Carol Roth, billion-dollar deal maker, TV personality, and host, business advisor, and author of the New York Times bestseller, The Entrepreneur Equation. She also went to Game 7 of the Cubs and who the heck did the Cubs beat? Cleveland. Yeah. How could I forget? And Julio Rivera, who did not go to Game 7, but he and I are Met fans. Newsmax insider, conservative activist, and host of the Julio Rivera Show on Lanterns Radio Network. All right, guys, I want to tell you guys a little story. Last night I was invited by Mort Klein, the head of the ZOA, Zionist Organization of America. He was a guest a week ago today on this show. And my son and I were invited, and we went to their annual gala at the Grand Hyatt, 42nd Street, right off between Lex and Park here in New York City. And we got there at the end of the cocktail hour, so it started 5. We got there about 5 to 6. And there were protesters in front of the hotel. I'm not talking about thousands or even 1,000, but there were maybe a couple of hundred or so, 250, and they were blocking the entrance to the hotel. Now, I can't imagine that the entrance to the hotel is public property. So I said to the cop, I said, okay, one cop, I said, and by the way, no bigger supporter of police than me, and I'm a former PBA Man of the Year here in New York City. And I said, my son and I have to get in. We're going to the dinner. He said, I don't think you're getting in. I said, really? And then I went over to walked a few feet and went to another cop. I said, my son and I really have to get into the dinner. He said, they're blocking the entrance. I don't see how you're getting in. And what I should have said was, are you kidding me? Aren't I the law-abiding person? Don't I have a right to enter that building? Well, aren't you going to clear a path? But the doorman for the building, the guy who hails the cabs and all that, happened to hear me. Said, come here, follow me. I said, where are we going? He said, I'm taking you in through Grand Central. He took us around and back of the protesters and in a side door into the lobby. So, I just can't believe, Julio, that New York City cops wouldn't do their best to escort civilians. I didn't throw around Newsmax or anything. I just said, I got to go to the dinner. And they said, no, you probably can't go.
Yeah, it's insane. I think that these, and you get the police being told in a lot of instances, and we saw it in Baltimore, to let protesters have their way, and that they're not really trying to maintain the civility. I mean, you weren't doing anything wrong. There was no reason for them to try to infringe on your right to go where you needed to go. But, this is part of, unfortunately, where we find ourselves. Like, the one thing that the liberals did, they lost the election, so they don't have leadership any longer. They don't have control of leadership, but they're trying to win thought leadership. They're trying to convince people, because that's all they have left now at this point. They invested, if you look at the people who invested in Hillary Clinton, who did it? Hollywood, people on Broadway perhaps, and people that are in the media were the ones who were really backing her up.
Carol, I want to go to Carol. To me, this is, I don't blame the police. This is Bill de Blasio's police force now. So that's why we have homeless people in the street, and urination is not a crime anymore in the street, and drinking is not a crime anymore in the street, and, and all the while cops are attacked here and around the country. So I'm not blaming the cops. This is what they're told to do. They don't just decide, well, I'm not going to do anything. They're told to just stand down.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Your rights are your rights until they infringe upon other people's rights. But what kills me about this entire thing, Steve, is do these protesters have any idea what they're protesting? I bet if you went around and said, okay, what specifically are you protesting?
Well, you know what they were, Carol, let me interrupt. You know what they were chanting? They were shouting down Steve Bannon, who was supposed to reportedly be at the event last night and couldn't make it for whatever reason. But they were chanting against him.
Right. So they were going to the Jewish organization and ranting and not letting people in because they're pro-Israel or something like that. And literally, everything that they do makes fundamentally no sense. And I'm all for protesting, but you have to have a reason that you're protesting. You have to have an outcome. I feel like they need to be working on that.
All right, let's move to the national scene here and the administration and what it's shaping up to be. Some great picks by Donald Trump. But what do you think, Julio, about the prospect, we discussed it with Pete Hoekstra, the prospect of Secretary of State, I can't believe I'm saying it, Mitt Romney?
Well, I mean, he certainly has a better idea than what's been going on the last 8 years. And, you know, maybe this is truly a cooling of that hostility between establishment elements that wanted to stop Donald Trump from becoming the president. I mean, let's face it, Mitt Romney was all behind, you know, Evan McMullin, and they were leading that Never Trump effort. So to see them working together, I think really shows pragmatism on the side of you know, Donald Trump. He realizes that we have to work together in order to achieve these objectives. And if he's willing to talk to Mitt Romney, he's really taking the high road and showing himself to be the bigger man after a primary and a general election where people didn't always, you know, weren't so fast to accuse him of that.
Yeah.
But here's the problem is that I like Mitt Romney being involved, but the question is, what's his highest and best use? And if you go back to when he was campaigning, we all said he's very strong on business and domestic policy, maybe not so much on foreign policy. So of all the places that you could utilize his business talents, why would you put him as Secretary of State? That fundamentally makes zero sense to me. I think that it's great that he's involved. I just don't think that that's where I would slot him.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you, I couldn't agree more. I'm just shocked that as vicious as Romney was, and don't forget, you know, you can't chalk it up to, well, you know, like Ted Cruz, they were in a vicious primary, and Trump called him name. I mean, Romney started it, and Romney continued it, and Romney gratuitously did it. And I think it, you know, I think it speaks volumes, though, Julio, to who Donald Trump really is, that he would even entertain Mitt Romney.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did what he needed to do to win, you know, the presidency, and then there were times within there, you know, and he was certainly attacked, and very unfairly at times, by the establishment. But if he thinks that there's a use for him to try to make the country better, he's willing to take that chance. And, you know, at the end of the day, I've always said this is about legacy for Trump. I think he wants to have a successful presidency. You know, he's obviously, you know, older. He's the oldest president ever at the time he's going to be sworn in. So if it takes using Mitt Romney to make the country better, whether it's through foreign policy, whether through its, you know, commerce or business or whatever capacity he helps the administration, he's willing to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Carol, let me ask you about what we saw at Hamilton. I even hate to use the name and give them publicity, but the booing of the crowd was outrageous enough. But the lecture from that creep, and that's, in my opinion, he's a creep to do that, from the stage was just outrageous.
It just wasn't appropriate. And as so many people have said, you know, you had invited somebody into your house, into your theater as your guest. And so when you invite someone into your home, that's not the way you treat them. This was not a conversation. This was not an exchange of ideas. This was a lecture and an ambush, and there was zero way for Mike Pence to respond back. So I just think at the end of the day it was tacky, and I think it was unfortunate because Hamilton's done a great job in getting young people and all kinds of people interested in history and in politics. And so I think that they should be the ones to be sort of above the fray and continue the dialogue on more of a fair and even playing field.
Julio, what'd you think of the whole spectacle? And of course, Pence took the high road and said he doesn't want an apology. And of course, Donald Trump is insisting upon one.
Yeah, that's funny. You know, they did it to the wrong guy because, I mean, Pence is such a class act and such a stand-up guy that you weren't going to get a nasty rebuttal or response out of Mike Pence. You know, and he said exactly what needed to be said. And it's true, man. People do have freedom of speech, but there's a certain lines you don't cross. And Carol's absolutely right. I mean, he came in there as a guest thinking this is, a space where he certainly wouldn't be attacked or be held to account in front of, and these celebrity people, you got to look at it like this, right? They're judging him when he hasn't had a day as the president yet, Donald Trump and his presidency. They're assuming that somehow he's not for all people. And you're seeing, and it's such a hypocrisy because you saw 15, 20 years ago where Jesse Jackson was praising Donald Trump for helping the black community. And he's done so much for inclusion. And then these people are just demagoguing him with really no basis.
Absolutely. And Carol, when they talk about Trump being anti-gay, from the beginning, Trump said, I don't care what bathroom anybody uses, which ticked me off, okay, as a social conservative. But what has he ever said or ever done or ever insinuated that's anti-gay?
Nothing. I mean, the reality is that up until recently, Donald Trump was a Democrat, and has been very socially conservative. He's held up the LGBTQ flag. He's invited Caitlyn Jenner in to use whatever restroom. This is not a concern of his. This is something that the left has taken and made a point of hysteria with no basis behind it, and it's completely frustrating. And I'll tell you something else, Steve.
What?
One of the other issues.
Right,
that
you're gonna have. You know what? Because we like you so much, and Julio, we're gonna bring you back after the break, and you could continue with that. Also, we're gonna talk about and hear from John McCain. We're gonna talk about what Barack Obama is threatening to do, and also the latest from Bernie Sanders. It's all next with the panel. Stay here.